You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 305. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, author of How to Get On Podcasts, the podcast matchmaker, and CEO and founder of the MLG Collective. I'm excited to share the stories and life lessons of changemakers and authors with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. Today, bearer of bad news. Well, not really. I have Elisabeth Dini, who is the author of the debut novel called Bearer of Bad News, and it is so good. The cover makes it seem like it's going to be fun and light, but it is that and more. It is deep. It is going to make you think. It is going to make you feel. You will cry. I promise you that. And it is so, so good. I loved getting to talk to Elisabeth and get to know her. She's an attorney whose focus was on human rights and war crimes. Badass. That is just a fact. So get ready for an incredible conversation. You're going to learn so much, and I really hope that you're going to feel inspired by the end. Hi, Elisabeth.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Coming all the way from the Netherlands. That's amazing. You're probably the furthest interview I've done so far. So that's extra exciting.
Well, the miracle of technology, right? It would have been more impressive, I guess, if I'd flown over.
Well, that would have been asking too much. No, that's not like your book.
Oh, yeah. Although that would be fun. I feel like if I had the opportunity to fly to meet people in person for podcasts, I would take it.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah. Then I'd really invest in a studio and chairs and all kinds of things.
Some nice potted plants for atmosphere.
The fake ones. Yes.
Yeah. The real ones are harder to keep looking nice.
Can you introduce yourself to everyone before we dive even further in, please?
Yeah, sure. Elisabeth Dini. I'm the author of Bearer of Bad News, which is my debut novel, and it's coming out on April 29th.
Which is today, because we're recording early, but it will be pub day.
Oh, amazing. Yes.
So happy pub day.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Yeah, my book came out today. So excited. Very thrilled to be with you, Michelle.
I enjoy being the first one to be able to say that, even though we're, over a month in advance, but that's okay.
No, I love it, honestly, and how cool that it will come out on Bobbin's debut date. So hooray, that's super exciting.
It was so good. I will share with everyone what I just shared with you. I did not expect what came out. I didn't expect to read that it went so deep the way that it did, because the cover is so fun, and you're just expecting this whole, it's going to be light, and then I'm crying. I cried throughout. I'm posting these quotes of like resistance and the beauty and the powers, and yes, I love it. I thoroughly enjoyed it so much.
Oh, I'm so glad. That makes me feel so good. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm really, really happy that you enjoyed the read.
Let's talk a little bit about what the book is about, and then I want to talk about you too, and we're not going to give spoilers away, but so we have Lucy, who is this hairdresser in Vegas, and that is exactly what, yes, get that picture in your head, everybody. And then she becomes the bearer of bad news, which is, it is utterly hilarious when you think about it, that's the title for the job that she gets. And then she goes on this mission to the Dolomites, and you share the rest.
Wow. So when she gets to the Dolomites, she's trying to track down the person that her client wants her to find. And she becomes embroiled in this 80-year-old mystery that involves a necklace last seen around the fall of Berlin in World War II. And as she starts to unravel that mystery, she realizes that she and her family are more entangled in the story than she ever could have imagined.
And there were parts where I went, oh, I know what's going to happen. I know, and I didn't. It, like, you totally twisted at the end, because there was a part where I went, oh, I know that's going to be with this one, and they're going to be here and related and this and that. And then I went, oh, nope, that's not what happened. Okay, good surprise at the end. But I love so much that besides being this lighthearted, and yes, is the bearer of bad news, and that's hilarious in a way. Bad news is not fun, but and she has all these mishaps, and you bring in an influencer, and she's a hot mess. But then you tackle huge issues, and World War II and the Jewish resistance and people who were helping other people get through this. And I think that's what made me fall in love with the book even more, because I related to it in today's time, because I feel like we're going through such a time of needing to resist in America, and just paying so much closer attention. I don't want to say we love World War II, but we are very big admirers of World War II veterans in our house. My father-in-law was a World War II veteran. We still have friends that are World War II veterans, or one of them is 103.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so it's very close to our hearts, and to see this in a book, it made it even more so for me.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting with World War II because it is, I mean, I'm also really fascinated by it. And I think in part it's because World War II is the last war where the bad guy was really clear. So there's really no ambiguity in terms of what side you should have been on, what the right side was, what the wrong side was. It's a very clear conflict in terms of apportioning out blame and where you should stand. And a lot of conflicts that have come since then, it's a little muddier. So I think World War II allows us to feel really good about how the U.S. showed up in the war, when we got involved. And a lot of stories have obviously been told about World War II, but there's a lot that also hasn't been told. And so I think I was really interested in the idea of Berlin and the Red Army coming, and what was happening for people that were still in Berlin during this time. And of course, there were Jews who were in hiding who actually spent the entirety of the war in Berlin, which to me was fascinating. I hadn't really known that before getting into research for this book. But there were also, by the end, it was a lot of women and children who were left in Berlin because all of the men, everyone who wasn't elderly or really young, had already gone out to fight, whether earlier in the war or the fall of Berlin, kind of the last battle. And so you essentially have the Red Army descending on Berlin, and it was mostly women and children who went through a horrible time, and most of them had nothing to do with Hitler or Nazism, the same way that very many Americans right now are probably feeling that actions that are happening in our government aren't things that they're choosing, or that they have any influence over, or that are in their name. And I think that's actually interesting, to be in a position where you're in your country and you're looking at certain things happening and thinking, wow, I really strongly disagree with this. And there's really nothing I can do. And that maybe creates a bit more understanding for some, not all. Of course, there were many people in many countries who could have done much more for the Jews and others who were targeted by Hitler. But at least for me, I also like to think about the human element in all these stories and try to have empathy and understanding for what people were going through. So it's probably a longer answer to your question, Michelle, but yeah, that was
No,
kind of my interest that got me into it initially.
that's perfect. And it's funny because I read your author's note, and what was true, and how you tied everything in, and the names, and that made me cry even after I finished reading the book, and how you brought so much of what's real into fiction. But you created the Department of Lost Things. And what is really funny about this is I just interviewed Jacqueline Friedland, who wrote Counting Backwards.
Okay,
And
yeah.
in her book, the husband creates a podcast to help Jewish families during World War II find their lost things.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
And
that's
I
so
was like, this
interesting.
is so weird. Like, there's all of these themes that keep popping up in the books that I'm reading, that I'm
Yeah.
not purposely reading them or picking them up. They just all kind of fall into place.
Yeah, well, I think
So
there's
it's
kind of like a
fascinating.
zeitgeist. Yeah, like a lot of times I have the same thing. You write something or you have a thought, and then you read a book and you're like, oh my gosh, someone already thought that or already wrote that. Or there's almost like just a sort of communication about ideas, and a lot of people have a lot of similar ideas at once, which is pretty cool. But I hadn't known about that podcast, so I'll have to check out her book and I'll be curious to read about it.
Yeah, yeah. Her interview comes out tomorrow, actually.
Oh,
So you
wonderful.
can
I'll
just
have to check it
listen to
out.
this show
Yes,
and
great.
learn more. Um, I want to talk about also what your career has been, because that also plays a part in the book, which I find so fascinating too. Share with everybody what you were doing before this novel came out.
Yeah, so I've done many things, but I'm a lawyer, and I had moved to the Netherlands in order to work for the International Criminal Court. And initially, I was working on a policy for how to interact with and rights involving children who are victims and witnesses for crimes in front of the court. And then that morphed into a job as a trial lawyer there. And so, in that capacity, I was investigating and putting together some of the cases on behalf of the Office of the Prosecutor at the ICC. And I think that's probably the the career step that you're referring to.
Yes. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
total badass. I was like, "Oh my goodness." I
Oh,
I try to I try not to read too much about the author or the book that I'm about to read. So I just go in open-minded. I don't read reviews or anything. Read the book and then I'm like, "Oh, I want to learn more about the author." I'm like, "Oh my goodness. A war crime attorney, like this is amazing." I just thought that was so cool that you've been doing this. What made you go from fighting international crime to I want to write this book?
yeah. So I have always written in my spare time, and I always felt like I was an author that would eventually publish a book, or that I hoped that I would eventually publish a book. Because of course, it's a long struggle in many cases, and for me too, to kind of get to that point. Um, and I loved working at the ICC, and I still have a really deep appreciation for human rights and human rights law and the people who are fighting in many ways, not just at the ICC, but in NGOs and nonprofits and all sorts of places to defend human rights in the US and abroad. But for me, it was a very heavy job. I mean, you're reading everyday witness statements or interviewing witnesses in person about the most horrific things you can imagine ever happening to a person, right? I mean, in one case that I think gives you a flavor for some of the things, a woman was talking about her baby being torn out of her arms and thrown into the jungle while she was on a forced march after being abducted from her village. And you read this, and I think for many people that work in these fields, you want to stay human, and to be human is to have empathy, to be able to hear stories and to relate on a human level to what you're hearing and to what someone else experienced. And I think after a certain period of time, exposure to these horrible, horrible, horrific things day after day after day, it can really dampen your empathy and make it hard to exist in the world as kind of like a regular person who has regular responses to things. And so at a certain point, I thought, yeah, I'm not going to do this forever. Like I'm happy that I did the time that I could do, working as hard as I could to the best of my ability to bring justice and closure and documentation and all of those things to these people's experiences. So there's more factors, of course. I mean, one being that as an American working at the ICC during this time, it was the first Trump presidency where sanctions were introduced against the ICC. So it made it complicated to continue to work there in that regard as well. Obviously, now that's kind of being revisited. The US has never been part of the ICC in a formal way because we never ratified the treaty called the Rome Statute that would commit countries to be under the ICC's jurisdiction. So, in that sense, the US has never been part of it. But previously, there weren't sanctions, and there was, I think, more of a mutual respect with regard to international law and the right of the ICC to exist. And I'm not sure what will happen. I certainly hope that that remains the case. But it's a very challenging time, I think, right now for international human rights law.
Absolutely. And we were just speaking of, because I just saw the post yesterday that we're now on the watchdog list in
Uh,
regards to human rights. And I mean, that's really frightening and scary because you think that America is, it's where everybody wants to go. It's the land of the free and opportunity and all of these things. And to be put on that list tells you that it's not. It certainly we're headed into a direction that is frightening.
yeah, I mean, I think for all values and norms, we all build those together. And so it's a community effort to maintain them. And I think when you've grown up, as I have, as probably you have too, in a country where you felt safe and where you didn't have to worry about a lot of the things that I heard about as a trial lawyer at the ICC, uh, there's not as much of an appreciation for how delicate some of these rights are. And I think now we are in a position where more and more people are thinking, wow, regardless of political persuasion, just realizing it doesn't matter whether I'm a Democrat or a Republican or an independent or a libertarian or whatever, I want to have freedom of speech, right? Like that's an American
Hmm.
value, it's an American right. Doesn't matter what my political persuasion is. I don't want to see political favors given out and have the rule of law flouted and have courts that become meaningless. These are values that transcend politics, and I think it's really sad that we're in a moment where we have to think about that, about where do we stand and what can we do. It can feel really like a powerless time, I would say. But we do live in a democracy. We have people who are elected to represent us, and I think there can be an kind of an idea of, oh, well, I can't do anything, it's not worth it. But uh, I think calling our Congress people, just letting them know what we think, even if we don't perceive that it has an effect, um, cumulative cumulatively, these things do have an effect, right? So
Yes.
it's not that one person ever makes a difference, but together we all make a difference. And having that belief that I'm one person that's part of many, and so you do your part as that one person, because without all these individual one people, you don't have a many. You'll never have a many, right? So it has to start with individuals saying, yes, I believe in these things and I'm going to show up and I'm going to reach across the aisle and cross political divides and just say, these are American values, these are values. And I didn't know when I wrote Bearer of Bad News that the resistance theme would be relevant in this way, right? Because I finished that book in summer of 2023. So a lot of the events that have shaped the current world landscape hadn't happened at that point. There were certainly signs of things that had started to kind of crumble, but we were in a very different place. And at that time, I'm reading these stories. You mentioned the author's note. A lot of young women, and of course, we don't always talk about women's stories, but there were a lot of young women, and they weren't just Jewish. Like the resistance was not just Jewish. These were people who were Catholics, they were communists, they were just regular German housewives. There were a lot of people that just felt this isn't right. This doesn't represent who I am or what I believe. And so they did something, and they weren't always doing big things. And I think that is a really important thing to keep in mind too. You don't have to be able to solve the problem to take action, right? Like just speaking out in small ways. Of course, in the book, there's flyers. I don't think that's a big spoiler, but that was actually something that did happen in Berlin. That people couldn't get news. We take for granted that we have all of these different sources of news, but at that time, once Hitler had completely taken over the media, you couldn't actually know as a regular person what was happening. And so there were people that had radios, which was illegal, and they would listen to BBC broadcasts. So they would literally be hunkered down in a basement or in an attic or wherever they could go, and they would be listening and transcribing. And then someone else would take their notes and type them up, and someone else would figure out how to use a lithograph to print them out. And then they were just passing out news, and that was an act of political resistance. And so for me, it was super inspiring just that all of these different people took action, not always together, not always perfectly, but they did something. And that for me is super inspiring.
Reading that, that's really what inspired me too, because I feel like I'm on that path and, what can I do? And here a little bit every day. And we call our senators, we call the congressmen, and, we post on social media and stuff. And then to read that, I posted the quote of how just seeing beauty around us is a form of resistance when everything else is like a dumpster fire. And I went, oh, this is so good. And the flower part came because the girl who the flower star, is that what that I think
Oh,
that was the
Flower Girl.
character.
Yeah, her
Flower
code
girl,
name.
yeah. Her code name is that she went around with a basket of flowers, but underneath all the flowers were these flyers she was handing out. And then she says in her interview that she felt like, yes, she was contributing, but also having something so beautiful was a way to contribute to this resistance as well. And it's amazing how many people that resonated with too, because I put it on TikTok, I put it on Instagram, and people are like, yes, yeah, exactly. That we need more of this. And so you're right, one person, yes, multiple people, like we're all working towards the same thing. I feel like we can make that difference. And reading the book and what people did and hiding people out, making sure, and I've seen people ask, on social media, where would you have been if this was World War II? Like, what
Mm,
side would you have been on? And it's definitely something I'm like, oh, I would have hidden somebody. Like, I would
yeah.
have taken them in because here I am. Will I get arrested right now? Because those are those possibilities that are going on in our country of, well, what's next? It's not so far-fetched, I feel, if you're speaking out on social media, that you're on a list somewhere, I'm sure, of what could be coming, and where do I stand in that? And am I
Mm.
okay with that? And what is my decision? Where do I want to be on that side of history? And then how do we teach our children about it? All of these things,
Mm.
they're all in your book. That felt like I was like, "Oh, it's gonna be fun, a distraction." I'm like, "No, this is it. This is resistance. We're here. History cannot repeat itself."
Yeah, I do think too that it's just so important to remember that people have to um, do what they can do, right? And so for each of us, it's different. And I think so many people just feel too tired to do anything. And that is for me what gets really scary, right? Because good people can't be quiet, right? And it's not a political issue. Like for me, I can't say that loud enough or strongly enough, right? Like there are people of all political persuasions who agree that human rights are important, that free speech is important. We agree about these values, and so there has to be a way where people can show up in whatever way they can, right? So, of course, some people are going to be willing to hide someone, right? To your example, but even if you're not willing to hide someone, if you're willing, what are you willing to do? Is it that you make a call? Is it that you might be the one who would have like typed up the letter and given it to someone else to deliver? Like what is in your ability to contribute? And I think the only way that we preserve a just, good, kind world is for everyone to do the one thing that they can do. And only you know what that thing is, and it might change by the day, right? Like we're people, we're going through our own shit, right, Michelle? Like there are some days that
Yeah.
it might be that one day you're like, look, I got up today and that was my win. And you know what? Like seriously, great. Like sometimes that is the win, right? But there are other days when you're going to feel stronger, when maybe you are able to forward something, right? You get a message and you're like, yes, this is good. I'm just going to forward to 5 people, or even just speaking up instead of staying quiet when someone says something that you disagree with. Like there are so many ways to resist, and they're very individual. And I think if there's one thing that I could say, like having learned really being in the thick of it with horrible things that have happened in the world, and the crimes and the cases that have come before the ICC, is good people cannot be quiet. That is the one thing. You cannot be quiet. And you don't have to do the same thing, right? Not everyone needs to hide someone. Not everyone needs to go out and stand in front of the tank, like that iconic image we all have seen from Tiananmen Square. Like not everyone has to do that, but everyone has to do something, right? To stand up for their values and their way of life, because otherwise we don't have values, right? Like it's community. And if you're not part of that community, if you're not a one among the many, that's when it all falls to shit. So I think if I can encourage anyone to do anything, it's just do one good thing, every day, one good thing. And the world would be so different, I think, if we all felt emboldened to do that.
I'm wishing that your book came out today, like as we're recording this, because I'm like, this is so good. Oh my gosh, how am I going to wait a month and a half to release this?
Oh, thanks, Michelle.
It's because it's the message that everyone needs to hear. And it's so hard when social media, the news, we get so many people saying certain things, go call your senator, do this, do that, do that. And I know that there are people who they either are afraid to, whatever it is, but they're not doing that one thing. And there was somebody commented last night and said, what frightens me the most is the people who prefer just to sleep right now.
Yeah.
And we can't sleep. And there are days where, yeah, you do need to rest. And I am all about that. Like, turn off the social media, get away from your phone, take that time, because we can't keep fighting if we don't fight for ourselves too, and allow for that moment of rest. But now is not the time to rest every single day, or, turn a blind eye to what's going on, because as evidenced by your book, like, if we do, then so much wrong will continue to happen. But because of all of these people who kept showing up, so much good can come out of it too. And it's the book has so many deep layers and meanings, and I was blown away. I fell in love with it, and I could not wait to talk to you. I was like, oh, this is, yes, I am such a fan.
Oh.
Yes, give me more. Please crank out the books.
Well, the next one is not a bearer of bad news book, so it'll be a little departure. But I do hope to kind of revisit Lucy in that world in a future book because it was super fun to write, and I also just love what you can do with the medium, like sort of the case file and having different ways to tell the narrative. Like it really made a lot possible that um, I would like to revisit. So
And it
hopefully
was
in
it
future.
made me curious because as you go from chapter to chapter, you're reading these interviews and you're kind of like, okay, what is going on here? What am I reading? Because it's getting serious. And then we go back to Lucy and she's on a mountain or an escalator. She's escaping an influencer. And then you go back to this. And then there's like a whodunit aspect to it too, which is intriguing. There's a romance aspect. You got it all. You literally covered it all in the book. So it was fantastic.
I'm so glad you liked it. Yeah, it was hard to do the case file because, I mean, honestly, like even to the last edit, and you think you read it so carefully, and you're like, oh, I definitely caught everything, and then you do the next edit, and you're like, oh, how could I have missed, all these things, and then the final edit, you're like, surely this one's going to be perfect, and it's like, no. And I think with that, it was so hard to keep track, like the details of the timeline because you want to put things in a book in a certain order for your reader, like what will maximize enjoyment, when do you want certain things to come out. But then you also have to have this coherent timeline that works. If someone were to like take all of the case file entries and put them in order, you'd want it to survive scrutiny. So just going through that, and I had a friend who's an appellate lawyer, and she's extremely persnickety, and she looked at that and she even found other things that I missed. So I thought like, oh, but hopefully the version that finally went out has all the little things caught. So I'll be curious. Like I'm waiting for the reader who writes and is like, did you know that this got, and I'm sure it will come. But it was also kind of fun because it felt, even for me as a writer, like really piecing everything together and trying to get it in just the right order so that it would make sense.
Before we started recording, you said that you're not like a plotter. So
No.
at what point, as you write, how long did it take you to write? And at what point were you going, okay, this is what's going to happen. I've got it.
Oh gosh. I mean, I never feel like I get to the point where I'm like, I've got it, because I, I'm just always working on it, and then there's always things that I find that could be better or could be different. So I think, oh gosh, how long did it take me to write? I started writing it. I had the idea for A Bearer of Bad News before the pandemic, but then I'd been thinking of like a more literary novel where the bad news would have been much more serious and it wouldn't have had this funny element at all. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh God, I cannot handle writing like busting out a depressing novel. So I thought I need to have some levity. And so Lucy's voice kind of came to me, and I had a lot of fun kind of creating that. I'm from Nevada. So having her be like a hairdresser in Nevada, that was like a fun tie in. And I finished it in 2023, like spring of 2023. Um, and I don't remember exactly when the Department of Lost Things element came in, but that really saved me as a narrative device, because then it was like, okay, because you're trying to think, yeah, you want to have this light novel, you want it to be fun, you want people to laugh. I had a little bit of like satire, like the influencer you mentioned, but um, and then I wanted to also have a sort of depth to it, and thinking, how can you have those two tones at the same time in the same book? And when I played with kind of writing in the perspective of the stories that are explored through the case file, that became so heavy so quickly. And I thought, that doesn't work. You can't go from like Lucy's head right into the head of someone who's trying to escape Berlin at the fall. Like it didn't work at all. So the case file was a way to sort of tell those stories, but with the distance of time. And then, of course, having like the present day mystery, so that you had people in real time also unraveling it. That ended up working. Because I don't plot, it's kind of like now I'm in the middle of book two, and I'm just like, my editor's like, when do you think you'll have a draft done? And I'm kind of like, geez, I don't know. It's like I could write 20 pages and they're great, or I write those 20 pages, then I write another 20 pages, and I realize actually, like, this character doesn't even make sense. She needs to be like from a different place with a different profession with a different everything, and then you have to completely go back. And I envy my friends who are plotters so much, because it's like they just have an outline, and then they write it and they're kind of like, why can't you just make an outline? And because I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. Like if I try to think forward, it's like I hit a pane of glass and I just can't see past it. I always know the ending. So I had the scene or something from the ending. So the scene in the letter, the sort of probably where you cried,
Yeah.
that was with me early on. So I'd had that written really early on, actually. But the rest of it, like I didn't really know how the mystery would be resolved or what all would happen until much later.
Oh, so good. I'm like, I cried a lot. So it was more than just
Oh.
the scene of the letter. Yeah. It was a lot. And when we're done, I will share with you all the places I cried.
Well, I feel sad that I made you cry, but also happy that I made you cry.
So good. No, there's nothing like crying on a Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. after you drop off the kids. And I had my coffee and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I'll share the pictures with you, not with anybody else.
Yes. Okay. I love that you took the pictures. Like, I think that's that's a
Yes,
commitment
everybody.
to
I
your
took
craft.
pictures of
Yeah.
myself crying. So that way maybe we could get this going viral for the book.
Oh, I love that, Michelle. That's so sweet. Well, yeah, it's funny with books. I mean, you just like you write it and you put it into the world and it resonates with people or it doesn't, or it gets a life of its own or it doesn't, or it gets a life of its own 5 years later or 10 years later or 15 years later. I really, I try to just like be really agnostic about it and just kind of be like, I'm just happy it's getting out into the world because that part as a writer, it's really, really something I'm just grateful for that I'm getting published after really wanting to have that happen for a number of years. My first novel died on sub, so uh, definite encouragement for anyone out there who's thinking like, oh, it's getting hard. Like, just keep doing it because I do think that for writers, it's really a matter of perseverance and just keeping at it to get to the point where your book gets out there, whatever book it is.
I love it. I'm so glad you wrote it. I'm so glad it's out there. I'm so glad we connected because I
Yes,
like
I've
you.
loved
I
this. I
like you
like
a
you
lot.
too. We're gonna meet in person. I'm already
Yes.
sure. I see drinks in
Yes.
San Jose for sure.
Yes. Or the Netherlands. I've got a
Oh,
passport.
come. Yes, I mean, get on a plane. I could hire you to deliver some bad news. Hopefully not about my book, but or about the country. Maybe like some like light bad news,
We
something
got it every
manageable.
day. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking more something like you ripped a sweater, like nothing that would make anyone cry. It
buttons
would
off
it
a
would be a
flannel.
modest fee, a modest fee. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you share with everyone where they can find you, learn more, connect, and buy your book?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram at Elisabeth Dini author. I'm not yet on TikTok, but I might get there. I have a website, elisabethdini.com, and my book is sold everywhere that books are sold. And I think you're going to include in the little
I will in
the
the show
show
notes.
notes the Simon and Schuster site, and that has links to several places. Yeah, and to everyone out there, gosh, if you read the book, let me know if you like it. I hope you do, but I'm also open to criticism or plot holes, whatever you find, let me know. I would love
No,
to
do
hear from you.
not tell her anything bad.
Well, you have to be willing to improve, Michelle. So I feel like you learned about a plot hole, you make the first book, you'll never make that plot hole again. It's a learning curve, right?
I love it. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It was
Yeah,
so much
thank you,
fun.
Michelle. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Friends, this is why I love books. The messages that we can glean from what we read, and then to get to talk to the author and to hear what Elizabeth had to say. I was completely blown away. I am in awe of everything that Elizabeth stands for, who she is. What a blessing to get to meet her and become her friend. Please go pick up Bearer of Bad News because this is a book that is going to resonate with you. I promise you that. It's a book that everyone should be reading because there's so many messages in it that you need to pay attention to. And they're applicable now just as they were applicable in World War II. So go and grab yourself a copy. We want to hear all about what you think. And when Elizabeth comes to the Bay Area, I'm going to let you know. We are definitely meeting up. There will be wine involved and lots of talking about the book and the resistance. Do the one thing today because many of us together, we can change the world. I promise you that.